The funeral was packed. Rows of uniforms stretched as far as the eye could see, metals catching the pale morning sun like shards of fire. The air was heavy, the kind of silence that pressed against your chest, broken only by the solemn notes of a distant bugle. At the center, the coffin rested, draped in the American flag. It was a send-off fit for a hero, a general who had given everything to his country. Then he appeared, an old man in a faded coat, his shoes scuffed and worn from years of wandering, his hands trembling as he leaned on a cane. His back was bent, his pace uneven, but there was something about the way he moved, not weakness, but weight. A weight of memories too heavy to carry. He shuffled toward the gate, eyes locked on the coffin. Two young guards stepped forward, rifles slung, their expressions hard. "Sorry, sir," one said firmly. "This is a closed service. Family and military personnel only." The old man's jaw tightened. His voice cracked when he spoke, carrying the ache of a lifetime. "I need to be there, please." "He was my brother." The guards exchanged uneasy glances, but rules were rules. One shook his head. "Move along, sir. This isn't for outsiders." The old man's shoulders sagged. A murmur rippled through the crowd, dismissive whispers rising. To them, he was a nobody, a shadow trying to step into a place too sacred. But then, from the front of the procession, a voice thundered. "Let him through." Every head turned. The guards froze, their faces paling. A four-star general had risen to his feet, eyes locked on the old man, his hand raised to halt the service itself. The funeral ground fell into stunned silence. The young guards looked shaken. Unsure, they saluted automatically as the four-star general approached. His polished boots crunched over the gravel, each step measured, deliberate. When he reached the old man, he stopped. For a long moment, he just stared, studying the weathered face before him. His lips parted, disbelief etched across his features. Then, in a voice low but filled with awe, he said, "My God, it's really you," the crowd gasped. Murmurs rippled like wind through leaves. Who was this frail stranger who could bring the ceremony to a standstill? The general extended his hand. "Come with me, sir." The old man hesitated, just a flicker of doubt, then placed his trembling hand into the general's firm grip. The two walked together down the center aisle, the sea of uniforms parting before them. Soldiers who moments ago stood rigid now leaned forward, whispering, their eyes hungry with curiosity. When they reached the front, the general gestured to a seat of honor beside the family. The widow of the fallen general looked at the old man. Recognition flashed in her eyes and tears welled instantly. She reached for his hand, clutching it as though it were her last anchor. "You came!" she whispered, her voice breaking. The truth swept through the mourners like a shockwave. This was no intruder. This was someone bound to the man in the coffin by a history none of them understood. The service continued, but it was no longer the same. Every set of eyes kept straying toward the old man. Soldiers who had fought in battles of their own wondered what kind of war could leave such a mark on someone. What kind of brotherhood could make a widow weep at the sight of him? When the final words were spoken, when the flag was folded and presented, the four-star general rose once more. He turned to face the gathered crowd, his voice clear and strong. "Before we conclude, you all deserve to know who this man is, because without him, none of us would be here today." Gasps swept across the mourners. The old man shook his head, almost pleading with his eyes not to draw attention. But the general pressed on, his voice unshaken. Decades ago, there was a mission so classified, its records remain buried under black ink. A mission where every man but one was reported dead. That one survivor carried scars you cannot see, secrets he could never share. He vanished into the shadows, letting the world forget his name so others could live free. The general's voice trembled with emotion now. "That man is here in front of you." Silence held the cemetery in its grip. The old man, who had shuffled in like an outsider, finally raised his head. His eyes, weathered, weary, yet unbroken, swept across the sea of faces. For a long moment, no one breathed. He turned his gaze to the coffin and spoke softly, though his words carried with the gravity of truth. "He saved me once. On a night when we thought none of us would make it back, he dragged me out of hell. I lived because of him. Every day since, I carried that debt. When they told me he was gone, I buried that pain. But I couldn't bury him." "Not really." The widow broke into sobs, clutching the folded flag against her chest. The soldiers who had doubted him, who had dismissed him at the gate, now stood straighter, guilt etched on their faces. Even the guards who had turned him away earlier looked stricken, as though the weight of their mistake pressed on their shoulders. The old man lowered his eyes. The silence around him filled not with judgment, but with reverence. The four-star general stepped forward. With crisp precision, he raised his hand in salute. Slowly, like a wave sweeping across the cemetery, every soldier followed. Hundreds of hands lifted in unison, a tide of respect that needed no words. The old man did not shed a tear. Instead, he pulled himself upright, his back stiffening despite the years that weighed on it. His arm rose, trembling but steady, returning the salute with all the dignity he had left. The funeral concluded, but no one moved. They stood frozen in respect as the old man walked to the coffin. He placed a weathered hand on the flag, closed his eyes, and whispered something too quiet for anyone to hear. It was not meant for them. It was meant for the brother who had saved his life long ago. Then, cane in hand, he turned to leave. No one stopped him. No one dared. The soldiers stepped aside, bowing their heads as he passed, honoring a man who had carried a burden they could never imagine. At the gate, the four-star general caught up to him, his expression solemn. "Where will you go now?" he asked quietly. The old man paused, looking off into the distance as if he could already see the road ahead. A faint, tired smile touched his lips. "Back to the shadows, where I belong." The general wanted to say more, to offer recognition, gratitude, something that could measure up to what the man had given. But the words died in his throat. Some lives didn't need medals or parades. Their very existence was a monument. As the veteran walked away, cane tapping against the stone, the silence of the soldiers behind him was heavier than any hymn. They knew they had witnessed something rare, something sacred, because heroes are remembered. But legends, they never die.